This episode and every episode is sponsored by my company, JDAQA Software Testing. We're your one-stop shop for manual, automated, performance, and security testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Shawn Richard, the CEO and founder of BlueSky Business Consulting. Hi, Shawn. How are you?
Doing great, Jay. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I was recently on your podcast, and we discovered our mutual love of the Philadelphia Phillies, which is just
Great.
there it is. Yeah, see, I did not. I was just telling you, I have a bunch of hats. I'm a hat guy, so people always say that I wear hats on these things, and I do, but I don't have my Phillies hat on today. But it's super cool what you do. You do a ton of podcasts. You also do a bunch of business consulting stuff. And I thought it'd be great to have you on just because of you're a people person. You're very personable, and you run a great business. So I think we'll get some cool stuff out of this. So it should be fun. So
Great.
talk to me about where you came from. I know you're in Utah now, Eagle Mountain, Utah specifically. But talk to me about kind of the early days, where you came from, and kind of your upbringing into getting out of high school.
Sure, that's great. Thank you for asking, and thank you again for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited. I love talking with you. I grew up in a little town in Oregon called Pendleton, and it's kind of a cowboy town. So for those that like rodeos and those kinds of things, Pendleton, Oregon is the place to be. So right in September, they have a huge rodeo. It lasts all week long. It's a lot of fun. And so that's the town and that's the environment that I kind of grew up in. I'm not really a cowboy myself though, but I still like the country western type style. I think that's kind of fun. And when I was in high school, 2 years before, between my sophomore and junior year of high school, we moved to Wyoming, the cowboy state, ironically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I finished high school. And then I came down here to Utah to go to school. I went to BYU, Brigham Young University. And then I've been working stalwartly ever since. And I thought that I would not stay in Utah, but 30 years later, I'm still here. So happily married with my wonderful wife, Kristen. We have two daughters. They're twins, actually. They're now 19, so they're getting a little bit older, ready to leave the nest here. And they're fantastic as well. So that's a little bit about my background and upbringing.
Yeah. Well, as a dad, I have to ask: is it easier or harder, do you think? And you don't really know the other side, but to have twins as compared to having different ages, I always, coming up, thought that there was some probably big difference there.
You're right. I don't know what it's like to just have a single. We just have the two. Those are our two and only two. But it was a challenge because, the first challenge is sleep. When you first bring them home, I try to be a supportive dad, and we had to work out a system where I would stay up late. I would stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning, and I would be on call. That was my job. I was allowed to sleep, but if the baby or babies started crying, I
Yep.
was on deck, and that's what I
Mm-hmm.
did. Meanwhile, so my wife would go to bed early, and then she'd sleep, and then we'd have about 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. We'd have a little bit of overlap where both of us were sound asleep. But then about 4 o'clock, she was on duty. She'd
Mm-hmm.
get up and she'd take care of them, and then I was allowed to sleep in a little bit, and that's how we managed to make it work because you're outnumbered if you're by yourself, and
Yeah, I
so
was gonna say you're immediately. That's the thing I thought of was like it's easy. It's easy to take care of one baby, but to try to do it with two, and then I'm assuming the one wakes the other one up, and it's got to be quite an interesting dynamic. Are they very close as twins?
oh yeah, they are really a lot of fun. They've always been fun girls. I tease them, and maybe I shouldn't, but I tease them that they share a brain because they think so much alike,
Mm-hmm.
and they are identical twins,
Okay.
and they like to do a lot of the same things together. Both of them in their senior year of high school, they concurrently enrolled in cosmetology school. So they're both hairstylists. They graduated from
Wow.
both high school and cosmetology, and they both work at the same place.
Do they
And
both have the
so,
same hairstyle?
what's that?
Did they both have the same hairstyle?
Sometimes they will, but
Okay.
they often work on each other and they'll kind of practice, if you will, on each other and do different hairstyles. So a lot of times they're different. But ironically, they're the types that they still want their individuality. So
Mm-hmm.
they won't dress alike. That's a very common thing. And I'll admit, I was one of those parents, and my wife, both of us, we had fun with it when they were little toddlers. We'd dress them alike and
Sure.
tease everybody because they couldn't tell them apart and all that kind of stuff. But once they got into school, kindergarten and first grade, they were like, "Dad, we don't want to do that anymore." And even now, every April Fools, I begged them. I was like, just dress alike and play April Fool's jokes. No, Dad, that's mean. I don't want to do that. They won't do it. They won't do it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I can imagine the urge to do that never goes away from a
No,
parent's
it doesn't.
perspective. All right, so let's rewind before the kids. You went, you moved out, you did BYU, and then kind of what did you come out of BYU with? Like, what were you trying to do when you came out of school?
I worked at a small startup that grew pretty quickly when I joined their team. We had what about 25, 30 employees, and it quickly grew to about 100. And this was in the 90s, and it was the dot com
Yep.
just sensation,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody was getting involved with dot com stuff. And our company had one of the very first, you see a ton of them now, but we had one of the very first templates to build a website where the common user, they didn't have to know HTML, didn't have to know Java. Those are the big languages back in the 90s.
Right.
And so we created a template where the common user could just go in and do things and have a site.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great experience. I started working in the accounting department as kind of an in between the customer database and the billing database, and then coordinating with the accountant to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that all the money was accounted for, that we were billing properly, because that was brand new back in the
Right.
90s. You weren't billing recurring for any kind of services. That's incredibly common now, but back then that was a new thing. And so I had to learn how to manage a database and mix that in with the accounting experience that I had and learn how to communicate to both. I'd work with the programmers to help them build the database and the billing system. And then I'd communicate with the accountant and make sure that both parties were happy.
Got
So
it. So
that's how I,
that did, and that how you that's is that how you cut your teeth kind of into the operations kind of things? Because it seems like a
yes,
very natural progression once you see both sides to move into operational kind
yeah.
of stuff.
I found I had a little bit of a big talent to work with people. So that was the
Hmm.
first thing I enjoyed. I don't mind the financial part. I have a skill for it and I'm pretty adept at it. But what I would like to think is that I'm really more skilled in communicating with people about finances than
Sure.
I am just about analyzing the numbers. And yeah, so after finishing that job, I kept working with small businesses and really, really enjoyed it. I respect the corporate environment and the culture, but I love working with the solopreneurs, the micro businesses, and the small businesses. Just people getting started. Kind of need a lot of help. And
Hmm.
that's how I got my start, so to speak, as I got a little bit older and moved more into a consulting role. It was because people were asking. They were like,
Yeah.
Shawn, what about this? What do you think about that? So I just find myself answering a lot of questions. And because of the background that I had had, I was knowledgeable in a lot of different areas, whether it was leadership, whether it was the finances that we've talked about, whether it
Hmm.
was operations. All of these things kind of came together. And I found myself capable enough to counsel and consult with people. But I love the small business environment. I love that stage that people are at where they're entrepreneurs and they're building and there's a lot of challenge, but there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. I just love that.
That is a fun space to live in. And once you go from big corporate world to that, if you were lucky enough to go through the pain of the big corporate world first, you really appreciate how exciting that space is and how, like to your background, it's kind of the Wild West. It's very much just whatever will work, is good enough at that moment. It's an interesting point about stepping out into consulting because I started to call myself a consulting evangelist because I think everybody should consult at some point in their life. I think once you get enough experience in anything, people will pay you good amounts of money for that expertise, and you don't have to kind of work your way up a ladder to be a consultant. You can get that experience doing XYZ and then apply that somewhere else. So where talk to me a little bit about stepping out from your 9 to 5 role into doing more consulting full time. Like what was that transition for you like?
I was fortunate because it was a fairly almost unexpected transition. When I first, to be honest with you, this is going back, oh boy, 15, 18 years ago. I really didn't plan on becoming a consultant. It just kind of happened because people were asking me those questions. Oh, Shawn, you work in business and you do some accounting. Can you help me with this? Or how do you
Right.
start an LLC here in the state of Utah or wherever? And I just would learn and I would explain. And then it kind of turned into where I had a few clients just kind of on the side. And then I just thought, it just makes sense to do this full time because I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I can make a difference and I can help people because that's really what I love doing in any situation is just helping people
Yeah.
and helping them to succeed. So I was fortunate for a lot of people. That's a very violent transition to go from being in the corporate world and a 9 to 5 job and then switching over to something where it's just you.
Yep.
And I've been fortunate. I still have those moments where I'm like, oh, wow, it's just me. But we're always fortunate to have good people surround us. And that's what I
Right.
try to do for others as well.
So very true. I could not agree more that it's violent is a great description of the transition from that world to
Able.
kind of yeah. It's very scary. It's one of the, it's like it's like a roller coaster where you know you're going to be scared to death, but it's probably going to be worth it. It's exciting and scary. And somebody said at some point, I read somewhere, that excitement and fear is in the same part of the brain. I don't know if that's true or not, but I like it so much that I've said that is true. So like I see the same thing with flying, right? Like getting my pilot's license, like it's terrifying to me, but also it's the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life. So it's like it's kind of balances out, and once you conquer that fear, you can kind of open the door to all the other stuff you're doing. So when that's a good segue into you go do consulting, you realize that the things that you're telling people are working and that they're liking working with you. When did you kind of have the moment where did you jump out and say, I'm going to make a business doing consulting? Or did that also slowly turn into a thing where you picked up the different pieces to become a business around your consulting, process that you developed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's difficult for me to pinpoint a moment where that
Mm-hmm.
just kind of happened. But I remember as I was working with the first client was actually, I was his employee. And it's
Mm-hmm.
transitioned to where I've now been kind of a little bit of a role reversal because he hired me to come in and help him run the company
Sure.
and in all aspects. Because it was just in the beginning, it was just two or three of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of the COO or operations director. I know titles in a small company, they don't mean much,
Right.
but it was, it was running all the finances and it was helping with operations and in some cases, just being kind of that sounding board,
Mm-hmm.
bouncing ideas off of each other, going, hey, can we try this? Can we try this? And where he was brand new to business, but had a lot of enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit older than he is. And so I was able to kind of provide what you might call that sage advice, a little bit older and okay,
Right.
well,
Yep.
let's think about this and consider this. And that's really important as well. And so I was fortunate to have that kind of easy transition where it just made sense to kind of at some point about 3 or 4 years ago, it just kind of switched a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's just a matter of acquiring other clients that are interested in the services and that I feel like I can help. I'm kind of spoiled because I tend to pick my clients a little bit and make sure it's a
Mm-hmm.
good fit both ways because that's
Right.
important. So
Yeah. No, it definitely is. Have you started to or had to identify any sort of niche or any sort of industry or any sort of vertical that kind of aligns with the stuff that you do? Like what have you found is your kind of sweet spot with your consulting business?
yeah, great question. For me, it's the folks that are in a micro business situation. For those that may not know, and if your listeners or viewers, a micro business is typically defined as about 10 employees or less.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are often solopreneurs that are now starting to scale a little bit. They're hiring a few people, maybe they've got some admin staff, that kind of thing to help them fulfill,
Right.
but they're thinking about growing and scaling it even beyond that. Now, for some, what we call a lifestyle business where they're making 150 200,000 a year, they're happy with that, they're happy with their team. That's not my ideal client. Mine is the one that says, I need to grow this, but I'm not sure how to do it. I'm not sure how to organize the team. They may be struggling a little bit with delegation and how to define roles and
Yep.
responsibilities within the company. There may be some financial pain. They're like, we're kind of stressed about money. We keep overdrawing the account or whatever it is. And so a little bit of accounting help can come in and solve that problem. And so for me, it's that person that's willing to learn, willing to
Mm-hmm.
listen, willing to collaborate, and I can come in and help guide them through that process. And Jay, I don't know if this has been your experience or not, but for a lot of folks, we all have our entrepreneurial dreams. We're excited about the idea of owning a business, starting a business, growing a business, and having it be something that becomes our life, our passion. And for a lot of people, that's how it starts. But then they run into some roadblocks and
Mm-hmm.
some challenges and some hurdles. And two things can often happen. One, they either figure it out with a whole lot of stress,
Right.
or they give up and they
Yep.
just quit. And then they go back to the 9 to 5 job that we were talking about. Or in some cases, even worse, they muscle through it but their entrepreneurial dream becomes in and of itself a job. And now they're
Yep.
not loving it anymore. They're making money and they're surviving, but it's causing a lot of stress. It's not working so well. So that's kind of a long description of kind of the ideal client, but it's really somebody who just wants to learn and be better and grow their business.
That's a great point about kind of that fire turning into a job, right? And I found even with hobbies of mine, and my dad always, he would always start a bunch of hobbies, and he would never, he would go buy the brand new set of golf clubs and then go golfing for 6 months and never do it again. And I think there's still like a 100-foot ham radio tower laying down next to the house that never got put up after he got his ham radio out. And I was always think like, that's crazy. Like I don't want to be like that when I get older. But then I kind of realized like that is how you can't just dip your toe in something. You have to kind of really give it an honest try, and you may find out that it's not as fun as you thought it was. But the things that are as fun and they continue to be fun are the things that we can kind of do for the duration, right? I mean, the different groups that we're in, the different networking places that we go to, and the business that we run. I think it's a great point. What have you found? Is it something that people can overcome, or is it really people hit those roadblocks and realize it's not as fun? Are they focusing on the wrong stuff, or is it something they can kind of fix and iterate on and kind of get that passion back with those businesses that you found? Or is it more, they're over the hill now and they need to try something else?
Great question. I have found that there are two types. One are kind of the people that you talked about. They're the kind of little bit of referencing your dad. They start the business and it's kind of a hobby for them. They love it and it's fun, and they think it would be fun to just do that all the time. But then they find out that there's actually some work involved, and work is a four-letter word. And I kind of, in a friendly way, kind of define it as the things you don't like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the things you do like to do are your entrepreneurial dreams, your passions, and that kind of stuff. But you've got this little element of work over here you have to do, and that's not the fun stuff. I have to be honest with you, Jay, I don't usually disclose this next part publicly, but when I'm looking at taking on a client, I kind of run through an informal survey, and I ask them some questions because I
Mm-hmm.
want to know, am I dealing with more of a hobbyist that's, maybe this ought to be just a part-time gig for you, something that just earns a little extra money
Right.
that you kind of keep it something you enjoy, and I might steer them that direction. And I kind of explore that option with them if I don't think that
Sure.
they're going to be the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are those, and this is the second type of person, there are those that are hungry enough and passionate enough that they will overcome it. And that's the fun part, is to help them and kind of guide them through the process to say, okay, what parts of the business are causing you the most stress, and what can we do to reduce them? And it's
Right.
actually very, very, very simple. All you really have to do is decide, are you going to do it? And if so, learn how to do it, or are you going to delegate it? The biggest challenge is that when people try to delegate it, they don't do it very well. And then it
Right.
creates conflict with the employees or the person that they're trying to delegate to, or stress for themselves. But there's a good way to delegate. And we probably won't take too much time today to go into detail on that. But those are your options. And we all
Yeah.
kind of know that, but it's
Right.
hard sometimes to process it. Either you do it yourself and figure it out, or you got to hire somebody or pay somebody else to do it and give it to them.
Right. Well, as I'm having this podcast with you, I'm realizing we're probably giving away some of your trade secrets. So feel free.
No, no, no,
We're
you're
talking
fine.
we're talking
I
about business consulting,
no,
and this
I
is your
won't share
bread and
anything I'm
butter.
not comfortable sharing.
There,
You're
there you
fine.
go. Yeah. But no, that's a great point about delegation. That seems to be when the real tumblers start to unlock in the lock of, at least for me and some of my friends that I've kind of tried to help with the delegation piece. We won't beat it to death, but I am curious. What is the first step for somebody if you were to tell them, you're overburdened, there's a bunch of areas that you could delegate. What's kind of the first, step or two that you kind of push people down to start to learn how to delegate things better themselves?
It's an amazingly obvious answer, and yet few people really think about it. Identify those activities, those tasks that have to get done that
Yep.
you like to do,
Mm-hmm.
and those that you do not like to do. You have to
Love it.
separate them. And then those that you like to do, you keep those. To me, that is the best part about being an entrepreneur. You get to decide what you want to keep and what you want to delegate.
Yeah.
and you keep the stuff that you like doing. That way you're always doing things that you enjoy doing. You wake up every day excited and you delegate those things to somebody else that probably has more interest in it, better skilled at it, likes it,
Right.
and now everybody's happy. And
Yeah.
that's how you scale.
I love that. I love the. I've never even thought about it in that way. What you like and what you don't like. I really do. Because that a lot of times somebody, and I even did, I was guilty of the same thing when I was trying to find an assistant, a virtual assistant or whatever. I was having a heck of a time just trying to figure out what is this person going to do every day? Like, what are the things that I want them to be doing instead of me? But to categorize it at least from the top level of, enjoyment versus work, which things I should be delegating from the work list and not the enjoy list. Because, like you said, I found that, delegating a lot of finance stuff was great for me because I don't love that. But keeping the sales and the marketing side, which is more exciting, and I'm learning that's the part that I've tried to keep. So you keyed on it a little bit, and I've heard this a bunch of times that a previous client or somebody you worked with before is your first client, right? Is your first customer. Have you found that to be the case with a lot of your companies that you've worked with? Are those first customers, are those first people that'll give you a shot, people that they've worked with in the past?
To some degree, yes. It kind of depends on the situation, but yeah, a lot of folks, when they transition to specializing, they have a core group of people that already know, and that helps that transition to be a little bit smoother because they can, and you have to be a little bit careful. So, a little bit of a caution to those who may be working in a corporate environment that are looking to break away.
Right.
If you steal clients, the company might be able to go after you. So you got to make sure you're not involved in a non-compete or a non-disclosure or anything like that. So be careful. But that's where a lot of people do get their first clients is somebody that they know, and it just naturally grows into that kind of a working consultant client relationship as far as like my business. But
Right.
others, they're not always. If you're more of a that's often in a service industry.
Yep.
If those are the people that you know, products typically come out of social media nowadays and advertising. It's like, hey, I've got this great product. I've got these great glasses right here,
Right.
and they're new and they're different because of this reason. And then you go out and you sell it, and
Sure.
that attracts the people that need that particular product. So
Right.
that's usually how it kind of works.
That makes sense that services based, and there's a degree of trust instilled in services based businesses. So you've
Exactly.
established that trust already that kind of carries into what you're doing to the next. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so so I think you mentioned you kind of like really went full tilt 3 or 4 years ago on the consulting kind of angle. What took you so long? What could you what got in your way for you finally just to say, all right, this is a viable thing. I can support my family on it. I'm good enough at doing this. And is it a combination of personal kind of confidence and happenstance and time? Like what pushed you over the edge to say now's the time to start this business and I know what I'm doing?
Boy, that's a great question. There are several words and phrases and reasons that kind of rush to mind. So I'm going to try and pick through these a little
Sure.
bit. I think first of all, it's either comfort zone or confidence. Either way, we all get comfortable, and therefore we kind of have our confidence in that little zone there, that comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to mentally get yourself into a place where you have the confidence that you can take that next step and the next step and the next step. It
Right.
doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. That doesn't mean that there are not going to be some failures along the way that you
Right.
can learn from, but you don't let it stop you. And that is a mental hurdle that a lot of people have trouble getting over.
Right.
I think in my case, you know, Jay, I'm a relationship guy. I love
Right.
people and I like to get to know people, and I'm less on the transaction, more about the relationship and what can I help you with, and what can I help you with. And
Sure.
so for me, part of the that little jump, it was having to recognize that, I'm not going to be spending all day with one of my good friends here
Mm-hmm.
and someone that I've gotten close to.
Right.
And for me, that was kind of like I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I had to kind of tell myself and remind myself that it's a little bit like changing schools. I told you that I moved to Wyoming. That's a big
Right.
change.
Right.
I had to remind myself that when I went through that process, I gained new friends. I didn't lose the old friends. I gained new ones.
Yep.
And so that little mental hurdle for me also was an important step, is to recognize, hey, I've been able to help my good friend here. There's no reason why I can't keep helping him. There's no reason why we can't keep together and working together in different way. But I also open the door to helping other people.
Right.
And that was a for me, that was probably even the bigger step than just the confidence, because that had built up slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, being able to kind of
Okay.
say, hey, there's an opportunity to help others. I want to go do that.
Side note, did you ever see a Sasquatch in Oregon? I didn't know until my wife went out to Seattle that like that whole area was like Sasquatch country. Were you part of the Sasquatch community out there? Was there a big contingency?
No, I never did. I never did. I saw some pretty wild looking people there, but mountain people. But
There's a good documentary on Hulu I think about that, and I think it was in Oregon, so that's what made me think of it.
that could be. That could be.
All right. Well, what would if you had to start it all over again, and kind of rewind, knowing what you know now? How would you go about starting Blue Sky again if you got to launch 20 years ago with the same knowledge? Times ignore the time change, but what would you start with today?
Boy, that's another excellent question. As I reflect back on kind of how this has evolved, I would want to move a little bit faster and trust myself a little bit more. And the word that I like to use is build up my own resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I define resilience is simply the ability to bounce back from something that you didn't expect. If
Sure.
something goes sideways, we're right on the end of a major upheaval for everybody in the entire world, and that was, of course, this COVID pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
it disrupted everybody. And this idea of resilience, to be able to bounce back and do so quickly, learn from whatever, if it was a mistake, if it was just an unexpected setback, whatever it was, but to build up your confidence that you can overcome that and that you can bounce back, and
Mm-hmm.
have enough confidence in yourself to know that. That's something I wish that I think for a lot of us, that's kind of a slow grow. We don't just learn that overnight. Some people feel like they're born with it, but when you get to know them, they have their insecurities inside as well.
Yep.
And but for me, I think if I were to kind of go back and talk to the Shawn Richards of 5, 7 years ago, I'd say, hey, Shawn, you're going to figure it out. You're going to figure
Right.
it out. Don't be afraid to take a few steps into the dark here, because sometimes you have to take a few steps in the dark to see the light at the other end.
Yep.
But if you're
That's
too
it.
busy looking at the light behind you, you can't see it. And
Yep.
so those opportunities are there. Just take a few steps. You don't have
Right.
to run into the dark, but
Right.
just take a few steps. You'll get there.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. So let's pivot a little bit. So you've got two 19-year-old, daughters. We all want to be around as long as we can for our kids, as a, entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a guy who, is a people person, you're busy, you're on calls all the time. But what are three kind of things that you're doing health-wise to kind of improve your longevity, right? It's a big I had a guy on a friend of mine, and he talked about longevity, which is something I didn't really think of that in the context of fitness, but just not just being strong, not just being fast or being whatever, being able to do a bunch of sit-ups and pull-ups. It's how do I do this for a very long time? So what are kind of three of your health tips or health things you're working on, and even if you're not doing them every day, but things you're kind of striving to do to increase your longevity?
The timing of this question is great, because for the past couple of months, I've been engaged in some revision of how I do things. And so
Okay, I
this
love
is
it.
good. I'm really excited to talk to you about it
All
because I can
right,
speak confidently about what
there
I'm
you
doing.
go. I love it. I love it.
I have been doing, um, within the eating realm, I've been doing three things: less carbs, less sugar, less portions. So just
Beautiful.
eat a little bit less, even of the healthy stuff, just eat it a little bit less. Yes, I'm a little bit hungrier, but I'm happy to say I've lost about 10 pounds in the last couple
Ah,
of months.
congratulations,
But,
dude.
well, thank you. It's a lifestyle change, and it's a hard one, but I'm trying to stay disciplined. So that's one thing. The second thing I'm doing is I'm exercising differently than I did before. I used to do a fair amount of cardio,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm trying to do more weights now as
Yep.
well. Build up the strength. I'm 53. I don't mind sharing that. I'm 53, so I'm getting a little bit older, and I've heard from different experts that weight training as you get older is more important.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the tone and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
the third thing I'm doing, and I don't know about everybody else, this one is a hard one for me, And that is very simply to get more sleep.
I knew it was
It
coming. I knew it was coming. I knew that was, and you're dead on. But I knew it was coming. That's the hardest one, man.
It's a hard one. I don't mind staying up late, and I love getting up early. I get up usually about 5:30 every morning, and
Yeah.
I'm in a family of four here, and the other three ladies in the house, they like to sleep in. Now they'll get up, but I'm the first one up, but I'm often the last one to go to sleep too.
Yep.
And but especially as you get older and your body starts to slow down, you need to sleep a little bit more. And so I'm trying to do that. If I cheat a little bit and add a fourth one, I'm trying to keep myself mentally fit as well.
Okay.
And I'm going to sneak that one in there as a fourth.
No,
But
please do. I have my 5 for 5, man. I if I can get up at 5, if I can get my 30 minutes of exercise in, my stretch in, my meditation in, and my journaling in, I feel like I can run through a brick wall. So it's like
there you go.
it's and it's all like you said, it's all about routine. How have you gone about sticking to that routine? How have you kind of made sure you're doing it as frequently as you need to be?
I had to get a little bit selfish. And I know it sounds a little strange, but I claim the first 4 hours of my day. And I
Hmm.
try really hard. I make some exceptions, but I try really hard not to let anybody interfere in those first 4 hours. So I get up around 5:30 and I have my routine in the morning that I stick to, and it includes the exercise, it includes some spiritual meditation and prayer,
Hmm.
and a little bit of family time. I mean, we have breakfast as a family, and I'm proud to say I'm the chef. I saw now it's not too hard to make pancakes, so
Right.
so, but that's a little bit of family time, and that's important to our family that we spend some time together because, of course, the rest of the day can be chaotic.
Yep.
But we try to make breakfast a priority. And then I make sure I exercise at least 30 minutes and try to get to 45 and 60, depending on what it is that I'm doing.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of saying, hey, I'm not really available until 9:30.
I like
And
that.
it's not, I don't stick to it 100% of the time. Sometimes I'll go to a breakfast with a potential client or an existing client or something like that. But
Hmm.
quite frankly, I don't let anybody bully me into doing anything during that 4 hour block on a consistent basis. So
I mean,
that's
the
how I do it.
consistency is key, I think, right? I mean, that's what everybody
Yep.
tells you, and like you said, it's a lifestyle
Yeah.
change, and it's like a lot of these terms have just been so overused that
Overused.
you
Yep.
hear them and you're like it's a life, like I get it, it's a lifestyle, but I mean, my biggest win probably ever, and I won't bring it up on my phone now, but it's been just about a year, and I track everything I eat, every single
Good for you.
thing that has gone into my big mouth over the last 300 and probably 50 days. I've used a little. It's called Lose It. It's just a free app on the iPhone, and they always say tracking stuff and data is like the number one way to do it. And I just got in the habit of it, and I tried doing it before, but I really stuck to it this time, and that at least will let me know why things are trending in the way they're trending and how I'm feeling, because you can see where the last week I ate 3,500 calories a day. Then you start to realize, like, okay, that's why the scale's a little bit heavier this week than it was last week, and why I'm not feeling as good or whatever. So just keeping track of that stuff has been, but like you said, consistency is key. And that I love the 4 hour block. That's a big block to lock out. So mystery question time. I should have like a cool sound effect that plays when that mystery, like a big banner that comes on the wall. But it's
Da-da-da-da.
it's hilarious because it's not a mystery. I ask the same one every week, so like eventually somebody's gonna go, I saw the one last week. So, but so far that hasn't happened, which I'm very grateful for. So, I love this question though. I know I'll give you a second to think about it. What's one thing you would do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Wow.
Yeah, see
One
that it'll
thing.
make you think a little bit.
Yeah. What's one thing I would do if I knew I couldn't fail?
See, I also need music playing this at this point where people are
Yeah.
thinking about it. I should have two
The little
two two
that's
sound clips there. The Jeopardy
right.
music.
Part of the challenge with the question is I've never had that question come up. I've been on a number of podcasts, and you kind of get used to the questions, and you can think on your feet very quickly because
Right,
they kind of hit the target somewhere, and you
right.
can adjust and pivot. But this is a brand new one. I I think I would talk to more people without worrying about whether I'm bugging them.
That's a great one.
If I knew that I wasn't going to annoy them by pushing them to be better than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can be a little hesitant on that. If I'm saying, hey, Jay, come on, you can do this, but I don't want to be an annoyance to them, I'll pull back a little bit. If I
Right.
know I've got their full trust and it's okay, then I'm going to push and I'm going to say, we can do this. Let's go. I'll help you, whatever it is.
Right.
But I tend to hold back a little bit because I'm like, well, I don't want to, don't want to offend them. It's not my place,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have authority or whatever word you want to use,
Right.
permission. So I hold back.
That's a
But I
great. That's a
think,
great answer.
well, thank you. It took a little digging there to try and find out what's in here that I would
Mm-hmm.
really get excited about helping, and that's just helping everybody see the vision of their own potential.
Right.
And I love it. Yeah, that's a great question.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, let's wrap it there, man. This was great. This was so much fun. I knew it was going to be a great time. I enjoyed being on your podcast, which I'll link in the, notes and everything. But what's your website URL?
It is Blue Sky Biz, B-I-Z, consulting, all one word, .com.
Got it. All right. Well, I hope that people will check you out. We'll link everything in the comments and everything. But it's been great, man. Shawn, you're awesome. I hope we get to stay up about Philly stuff all season, and it becomes more of
Well,
a happy tone than a 1-5 start. But we'll see how they do at home today. Hopefully, Zach Wheeler will get up there and start hurling some 98-mile-an-hour fastballs past some folks. But
there you go.
it's crazy how sports can connect folks, across the country, across the globe, and I'm glad to have found a Phillies fan out in Utah. Even though if you're a lonely Phillies fan out there, we still appreciate the support. So, Shawn, it was great talking to you, and thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Jay, really appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.